Good afternoon. I'm going to call the regular Parks and Recreation Commission meeting to order for February 23rd, 2011. Would you all rise for the pledge, please? Ready to pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. McGill, would you call roll, please?
Chair Wiscombe.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
K-Spear.
Here.
Ferrara. Here. Jacobson.
Here.
Longstreet.
Here.
Intern Yee. Larimore Hall is not present.
Thank you, Ms. McGill. Okay, Ms. Rapp, any changes to the agenda?
Just one, Commissioners. The Cabrillo Ball Field discussion indicates that the estimated time will be 5:15. That is what went out on the agenda, and due to my error, I emailed stakeholders who have been involved in various discussions that the meeting estimated time would be 5:30, and I asked them to forward the email liberally. So as a courtesy to anyone who got my email, if we could start that item no earlier than 5:30, I would appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. We'll make you sing for the 15 minutes. How's that? Just kidding. Okay, do we have any written communications?
The Commission has only received items related to the Cabrillo Ball Field.
Right. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to move on to public comment. It looks like we have one speaker. Any member of the public may address the Commission for up to 1 minute on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled for public discussion before the Commission. And we have one speaker slip from Mr. Chuck Rose. Welcome, Mr. Rose.
Mr. Rapp, Commissioners, I only get 1 minute when we got 15 to play with. My name's Chuck Rose. I'm executive director of, used to be Santa Barbara Pony Baseball. We changed our name 2 years ago to Greater Santa Barbara Youth Baseball. We did it for a reason. When I first got involved with the kids here about 12 years ago, it was always us that gets them. Regardless of who it was. It's no longer that way. DP Little League, Galena Valley South, all 5 local high schools, UCSB, and you as our partners of 37 years are all involved in it together now. It's Greater Santa Barbara. It's not just us. We control it, but it's everybody. The reason I'm here today, as I do every year, is a week from this Saturday, weather permitting, is our opening day at McKenzie Park. 9 a.m., March 5. In spite of the economy, we're up over 400 kids again and still growing. Come on out and see the future of Santa Barbara. Somebody once asked me, with my son, who's 33 now, I didn't mind taking him to sports all the time. Pardon the ego. Yeah, he was a state champion, but he always dragged me there because he wanted to be there, because it was attractive. His grades were better when he played. He never got in trouble. Somebody once asked me, again, if I minded being there that often, and I hold the same comment today. I'd rather have him at center field or center ice than smoking dope behind the 7-Eleven. Anyway, we hope you'll all join us. It only takes about an hour. Got a big barbecue going, but come on out and see the kids. They are the future. This ain't about me, it's about them.
Chuck, did you say what time?
9 a.m.
9 a.m., and that's March 5th.
Yes, ma'am.
Saturday, March 5th at McKenzie Park.
You can't
Great.
miss us. We're going to be the only people there.
Great. Okay, thank you so much.
Other than that, we hope to see you then, and I'll see you in an hour and a half.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you.
Just remember, parking is a challenge because it's a big crowd.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, that closes public comment, and we will move on to Commissioner Committee assignment reports. Let's start down at to my left here. Does anyone have a report?
Thank you, Chair Wiscombe. Actually, we haven't had a meeting with the Integrated Pest Management since the last time. Thank you. So nothing new to report there.
Okay, Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I'm on the Front Country Trails Multi-Jurisdictional Task Force along with BB, and our meeting will be next Wednesday at the county building. I think 5 o'clock, right? Or is it here?
I think we're moving here.
Here.
Yes.
I'm right on top of things. Thank you for that. We'll be moving here next Wednesday. One of the nice things going on with Front Country Trails is they've been working on getting the trails mapped with like a GS coordinates, and that has happened. It isn't final yet, but a lot of activity has been going on with the trails. They've also done the volunteer groups have done some work on the trails, making them safer over the last few months. So I just that things are moving on very well with that. And thank you for reminding me that it's here. Thank you. And BB will talk, I think, on park.
Okay.
And to confirm, the meeting is here in City Council chambers next Wednesday, and it starts at 5:30.
Okay, great, thank you. And Ms. Longstreet, you go ahead.
And Mr. Burns and I attended the Park Foundation meeting today. And the Park Foundation is moving along in its support of the mission of the Parks and Recreation Department. We're very pleased, and we're looking for some growth and activity over this next year in our fundraising activities. So encourage anybody that's interested to look for the Park Foundation. There is a website, and we're moving along, and it's going to be very important in the next year to get the community support.
Great, thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Casebeer?
Thank you. I attended the Creeks Advisory Committee meeting this last week, and the most significant thing that was discussed was a presentation on the project that's coming up, next year, on Lower Mission Creek, where it crosses Cabrillo. That bridge over Cabrillo will be rebuilt, and the creek banks from all the way along there are going to be upgraded and should be a vast improvement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Casebeer. Okay, I have a couple things to report. On February 2nd, I attended a special meeting of the Gulf Advisory Committee. I reported last month that they're going to meet on a monthly basis through the budget process for the next budget year. And we reviewed the core strategies that were put together. And I'm just going to go over them because I think it's important for the Commission to know what these are. And number one is to position the golf club as a high-value course and improve the golf experience for all the players. Number two is to look at the pricing to meet revenue goals and, change that up a bit. I think that's probably going to happen. Number three is look at loyalty programs to retain and attract members. And retaining members is one of the key priorities for the committee. Number four is sales to attract partners, and partners can be tournament partners or hotels. They're looking at various ways to do that. And number five is marketing, to make sure the course is more visible and to improve the image of the course in any way possible. So and then they compared some scenarios for FY12, increases and decreases in fees and implementing different programs. So there's really a lot of pretty good work going on with the committee to really evaluate the changes in fee structure that will probably be made at the golf course. So, and on February 3rd, I attended the regular Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting. We got an update on enforcement cases from Mr. Downey. And Mr. Downey and Ms. Zachary provided an overview of the process for the Urban Forest Master Plan. We don't have a schedule yet, and it's going to be an open community process, probably taking 18 to 24 months. And staff will formulate a working group for guidance through the master plan process. So this is all very exciting stuff that's happening there. We also had a discussion about increasing diversity in our urban forest, which is one of the cities and one of the Street Tree Advisory Committee's goals. And that continues to be one of their main topics. And Mr. Downey handed out the community guide to tree planting, which you all have a copy of here, and he'll talk about that. That's a very exciting item that's come up. And then we made the site visits to review the trees on today's agenda. So that's the end of my report, and I think we've covered everybody. I notice we have Councilmember House here. Welcome. Nice to see you. Okay. And now we'll move on to commission and staff communications. Ms. Rapp? Did I do something? Oh.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, I did want to acknowledge that Councilmember Grant House is here. He is our new council liaison to the Park and Recreation Commission, so we welcome him and look forward to his involvement with the work of the commission. And I am the bearer of unfortunate news. I was contacted earlier today by Commissioner Larimore Hall, who, with regret, had to submit his withdrawal from the Park and Recreation Commission. And he was unfortunately not able to come to the meeting tonight. He has just taken on some new professional responsibilities, and in weighing everything that he has going on, he just felt that he really couldn't continue to be involved with the commission. But and he will come and say this hopefully at the March meeting, but expressed his appreciation for all the work of the commission and has enjoyed tremendously his time working with the commission to serve the parks and recreation needs of the community. So he is hoping that he'll be here to speak at public comment at your March meeting.
Great. Yes, Ms.
I would
Longstreet.
just like to express my appreciation. Durakabat brought a very good viewpoint to what we do here, and I really appreciated working with him.
Yeah, I echo that. Yes, Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I also very, very shocked that it's happened. But he would give a nice, if I could use the word, a nice, thoughtful, reasoned view, looking at the long run, it's always appreciated. And I'm sorry that he's decided to leave.
Yeah, he will be greatly missed on the commission. Since he was the vice chair, I think, Ms. McGill, could you put it on the calendar for the March meeting for the commission to elect a new vice chair? That'd be great. Thank you very much for that. Yes, Ms. Rapp.
And Chair Wiscombe and I were talking earlier before the meeting about the timing for the appointment of a new commissioner. So the city clerk, as soon as she receives the proper notification from Duraka, will then add the opening to the next recruitment for city boards and commissions, and people who are interested can apply, and then commission will consider all of those folks and make appointments in June. So we should have a 7th commissioner in July for our July meeting.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Rapp. Appreciate that. Okay. We will move on to Youth Council report. Mr. Yee, welcome.
Okay, so Youth Council is it's not 100%, but we're planning to have a speak out on immigration. And we're working with Friday Night Live and other youth groups to hold our annual Spark town hall meeting. That's very fun. And Mentoring and Health is continuing its participation with the AOK mentoring program. And fundraising is continuing the 100-100 fundraising event, in which youth council members each aim to raise $100 in 100 days. So if anyone wants to make a donation, you can contact me.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Yu. Appreciate it.
Chair Liscum?
Yes.
I'd
Mr.
just like
Casebeer?
to do a follow-up on the youth report. I have a young youth who was very happy to see that the teen center was open on the most recent national holiday, which was President's Day. I guess in the past, the teen center had been closed on those kinds of holidays. And so I guess this is maybe a reflection of the Police Activity League, their commitment to having this facility open and available.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Casebeer. Okay. We are moving on to consent calendar, and the first item on the consent calendar is summary of council actions. We have an attachment in our package. Ms. Rapp, did you want to go over those, or are we?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, we did provide the Commissioners with a copy of the outcome from the appeal of Dr. Michael Cooper of your denial of removing a Phoenix Canary Island date palm. I'm not even going to try to go after that Latin name. So we did copy you on that, so you got that information. And then we will actually, council will have another appeal of a setback tree removal, which is scheduled currently, I believe, for March 22nd. That came before the commission at your last meeting, I believe. So, and that's really all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Ms. Rapp. Okay, we are going to move on to item number 2 on the consent calendar, which is approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any discussion or question about the minutes, or seeing as there's none, does someone want to make a motion?
I'd move that we accept the minutes for January 22nd and February 11th.
January 26th.
January 26th
Yeah.
and February
Yeah.
11th, as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Hey.
Okay, that carries unanimously. Those are approved. And now we're on to the Street Tree Advisory Committee items, which is number 3 on our agenda. I'm going to I'm looking for you over there. You're over here. I'm going to just make it a practice to make an announcement before you start, Mr. Downey, and that's that any decision by this commission on any of the street tree items is appealable to City Council within 10 days. And there's been some confusion about that, and apparently some people didn't know that, so I think it's just a good practice to make sure everyone knows that at the beginning. Okay, Mr. Downey, we're on to 3A, number 1, which is 3179 Lucinda Lane.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, before I get to the street tree items,
right.
I'd like to share with you an announcement that we have worked through CAL FIRE grant as part of the inventory assessment report that you've received before. One of the items that we said we would do in conjunction with that grant would provide community outreach documents. What you have before you is the community guide to tree planting. that we have launched. There is a link on our website. It's available in PDF on the website. You can get it there. It's a really nice guide to help people decide how they can plant more trees in the community on private property. It goes through the procedures to select, has some examples of some trees that grow really well in Santa Barbara. It talks about the forestry program briefly, and the items that you review are also covered. So I just wanted to announce that this is available online, and urge you to go through it and share it with whomever you think might receive some value from it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Downey. And you're distributing it to various organizations that would be interested. I know you've been to Santa Barbara Beautiful, and I think there's several others where you're distributing it also. Is that correct?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, we plan to distribute this to many of the review bodies, the city review bodies, City Council. We've distributed it already to Santa Barbara Beautiful, and we're hoping to put together an information piece on City TV that will also include portions of this as well.
Great. Okay. It's really a superb document, and I have to commend staff on the layout and the presentation. It's a great educational tool, and it's I had the opportunity of seeing it earlier, so I've been through it. So, but thank you very much. It's really a wonderful document, and I think it's going to be very helpful for the public to have. So, okay, Mr. Downey.
The first item on the street tree agenda is 3179 Lucinda Lane. This is liquid amber, American sweet gum tree. It is located between two driveways. There's also water service lines that go through in that area. Recently, the street division made repairs to the sidewalk, and there was some root pruning that was done. Forestry staff evaluated the tree at that time and determined that the tree could survive quite a long time in that space, along with the repairs, so it was determined that the tree should stay. Subsequent to that, the applicant has submitted a request to remove the tree. The Street Advisory Committee reviewed the area and determined that the space is a bit small for the tree, and it's likely that damage will occur in the future. The tree is directly in front of some very mature pine trees on the property. Lacking at this site is a street tree on the other side of the driveway where there's quite a bit of space and it's wide open. The committee determined would be appropriate to allow the removal of this tree, considering the open space in front. Their recommendation is to conditionally approve on the condition that the applicant plant the designated street tree on the other side of the driveway.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Downey? And I don't think we have any public comment about the tree, so we'll move on to discussion.
Well, I would move that we accept the street tree recommendation for 3179 Lucinda Lane.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Okay, and now we're on to 3B1, which is 125 State Street. Mr. Downey?
Chair, Wisconsin Commissioners, 125 State Street is currently a vacant lot. It's proposed to be developed as a children's museum. The project is currently received concept approval from the Historic Landmark Commission. The committee in visiting the site determined that an adjacent project that this committee reviewed in 2004 would have an effect on what this project is proposing for the street trees, and wanted an opportunity to look at those plans to see if it had an impact. It turns out that there was approval for removal of these trees along with that project in 2004. However, this section may have changed a bit from when it was approved before, and I am looking into whether it needs to come back to this commission for approval. The committee determined that it would be appropriate to look at those plans before determining the fate of these trees in respect to this project, and recommend that the decision be postponed until those plans can be reviewed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Downey. Any questions?
I was on the commission when we reviewed the lower end of State Street there, and I have some pretty strong feelings that that is a major entryway into the city. And I think about the time that we spent in the downtown area, and I think this area deserves the same amount of consideration. I would agree to postpone this. We need a planting plan along the entire street, that whole area that is cohesive. So it does not, to me, impact their project at all, these two street trees. So I would agree and really hope that we take the time to look at that area in total.
Yes, Mr. Ferrara?
Yeah, I would go ahead and make a motion to concur with the street tree advisory tree recommendation for 125 State Street.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I just hope that as this goes forward, and it doesn't look like there's any rush to move it forward quickly, that we don't get this bogged down if it happens. That doesn't sound like it will, but I just hope we don't, get this into taking longer than it needs to.
I wouldn't think that the street tree planning would affect their development per se, and I'm really happy to see things moving in that area now. I mean, there's several projects coming to the fore, but I think there needs to be a coordinated effort on it, a site visit with the Street Tree Advisory Committee, and if there's another body involved, that we need to all make sure that we're giving the same direction and on the same page.
Yeah, my recollection is that community development asked the applicant to come very, very early to the Street Tree Advisory Committee with the application for removal of the trees and replacement of the trees. So I think we're early enough that we can take the time perhaps to review it.
Mr. Downey, could you give a status report of when you believe that the Law Entrada project will be coming back for review? I know that there was some discussion of this at other boards. Yes?
Commissioners and Ms. Rapp, the item has received preliminary approval from the HLC for the Law Entrada project. It is moving forward to the Planning Commission for review. I did receive a copy of the landscape plan that is being proposed as part of that project. So, if for some reason what needs to be determined is which project is going to make the public improvements, and at that time, I think it would be appropriate then to bring back to this commission the request of one or the other, not mix up the two. But they have received preliminary approval for the project, and it is moving forward in the process.
But I also, just watching HLC, as I sometimes do, Hotel Santa Barbara State Street Hotel is a separate project that is not part of La Entrada and is in the planning process and right next door. And Bebop is another project that they're upgrading the property. So that's really the block we're talking, and it needs to fit in with what we've already approved for La Entrada, is what I see. Because we've got a bunch of State Street and then one block over by the train station that isn't part of La Entrada. So that's sort of where I think we need to look at it in total. And that's a big deal, I think. So,
Commissioners, I do, and I recall, as Commissioner Longstreet does, the amount of time that previous commissioners, because this was several years ago, spent on the landscape plan for La Entrada, because it was a significant change to how that area looks now. So with that, we will look at what we need to bring back to the Commission in terms of what's been approved already and anything that is changing. And I am hearing that the Commission wants to make sure that whatever is approved has kind of a consistent look in those different parcels that are moving forward. So we'll bring that back, and we'll look at what has been already approved and what changes there are, and I think that's a good place to begin.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, you made the motion. Did you make the motion, or?
I second.
Mr. Farrar, you made the motion. But you made the comment, Ms. Longstreet. Are you both comfortable? What I'm hearing is that this involves more than La Entrada. Is that correct? And the motion is that the decision be postponed until STAC can review the proposed landscape plan for the La Entrada. Does the maker of the motion and the seconder want to broaden that?
Maybe, and other projects, adjacent projects.
I would concur with that.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion is that the decision is postponed until STAC can review the proposed landscape plan for La Entrada project across the street and other projects adjacent to this project.
This address, yes.
Okay, great. Okay, and we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. We're on to 3C1, 222 East Constance Avenue. Mr. Downey?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, 222 East Constance Avenue is a Phoenix canariensis, Canary Island date palm, that was not planted by the property owner. It was likely planted naturally within the middle of a hedge. Wasn't designed to be there. The committee determined it's not the proper location and recommend that this be approved.
Thank you. Okay, we don't have any public comment on this item. I'll open it up to the Commission for questions or discussion. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Downey, is it possible to, this looks like a beautiful tree if it were in another location. Is it too large or mature to possibly be relocated to another location?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Farrar, the tree is not too large to relocate. However, the adjacent, in order to do so, they would have to excavate on the adjacent neighbor's property and destroy more of the hedge than they anticipated doing in this removal. The other trees of this size are readily available and widely available, so there isn't much value in creating that much havoc to save this tree.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yes, Ms. Jacobson?
Mr. Downey, I just wanted to know, are they planning on planting anything else there? Because I did see it, and it was it is a nice tree. I know it really doesn't match the planter, but I kind of think maybe the planter could be changed.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Jacobson, the applicant is proposing to replant hedge material, probably oleander, to fill in where the tree would be vacating.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Casebeer?
I'd like to make a motion to concur with staff's recommendation to remove the Phoenix canarias. I was going to try that. Canariensis
That's right.
at 222 East Constance Avenue.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, motion carries unanimously. We're moving on to 3C2, 1730 Garden Street. Mr. Downey?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, 1730 Garden Street holds 5 evergreen pear trees that line the driveway behind the hedge for this property. The trees, well, we've had discussions with this commission before about fire blight. These trees have a disease called fire blight, which diminishes their health, and it's unlikely that it kills them, or rarely kills them, but it just creates early leaf drop, thin canopies. The trees simply don't provide the benefit that they were intended to provide. The applicant is proposing to replace these trees, I believe it was with 2 Marina strawberry trees on the one side of the driveway. The committee concurred with that and recommends that his application be approved.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions? Mr. Ferrara, did you have? Oh, okay.
I move that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for 1730 Garden Street. See, I don't even try the names.
I second that.
Okay. I didn't see, just as a point, I didn't see the quantity, and that was one of my questions, was the quantity. So it is 2 24-inch box Arbutus Marinas? Is that, I couldn't find that in here.
Commissioner Wiscombe, bear with me. I'll look at the application.
I know they're doing he's doing on the hedge side of the driveway.
What is he saying for?
Yeah. On the setback tree removal application, it states that the trees will be replaced with Arbutus
Marina. Yeah.
And the number is 4. See, right?
Number. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Chair
okay.
Wiscombe and Commissioners, I'm uncertain whether that is an X or a 4. I do not know that there's been an indication of the number of trees.
I wouldn't think there's room for 4 of them on the hedge side, but okay. So as long as the okay, so as long as everyone's comfortable that the proposed replacements is what it is, whether it's 1 or 2 or 4 or whatever, unless someone wants to stipulate it in their motion. Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second. We did get that far, right? Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Let's go on to 3D1, 915 West Mission Street.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, 915 West Mission Street, the applicant is requesting to remove a Japanese black pine in the front yard. The tree is surrounded by palms of many varieties. The applicant's reasons were that he wants to replace the tree with a triple-trunked king palm to be more consistent with his other landscape, and that the tree was getting into the wires. The committee reviewed that, and on a 4-to-1 vote, voted to approve the removal on the condition he replants with the proposed 3-trunked king palm.
Okay, thank you. No public comment on this item. I'll open it up to the commission for discussion. Questions? Yes, Mr. Ferrara?
Mr. Downey, what was the reasoning for the dissenting vote on that street tree committee for the removal of that tree?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Ferrara, the comment that member made was that although the palms would be more consistent with the plantings, she just couldn't see losing this tree for that reason.
Is it a rare tree or is it a standard tree? What's the history of that tree?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Ferrara, this tree is fairly widely planted in the area. This is a very good specimen of the tree. It is not a specimen tree, but it provides it's probably one of the better ones I've seen in the area as far as condition. Its condition is not great, but this is conducive of how they grow here. So it's considering the area and how well they grow here, this is in about as good shape as it could be.
And I'd like to follow up on that with a little more. Is the tree reached its near capacity for growth? And it mentions here he mentions potential root damage to the sidewalk. Would that happen in the future, and based on the age of that tree now? And would it be prunable as far as the power lines go?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Ferrara, all of those items you mentioned are maintenance items that could be achieved. Could be pruned for the wires. It could be root pruned for any sidewalk damage in the future. The tree is about as mature as it's going to get in this community. I don't see it getting much larger than it is. I think that answers your questions.
So what is the main issue for having this tree removed then?
The committee determined that the proposed replacement tree was consistent with the plantings in the yard, and it wouldn't be a significant loss to the community.
Yes, Ms. Jacobson?
I have a question, Mr. Downey, about the height of the 3 trees being planted, king palms. Don't they get tall? And it seems to me they would grow right into the same power lines.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Jacobson, the wires are not directly over the space. They are somewhat to the side. And the growth habit of the pine would be to grow a little wider than the palms would. The palms would grow up more directly and not grow actually into the wires, but adjacent to them.
Mr. Ferrara?
It mentions here that reason for removal, they say it's diseased. Is it diseased? Did I just mention that? It was in, I have the right one here, good shape.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Ferrara, the tree does have some disease, but it's more conducive to the area that it's growing in is not its native area, and whenever you put something in its non-native area, it doesn't thrive as well as it does in its native environment, so therefore it's more susceptible to things. The level of disease in this tree is insignificant, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Yes, Mr. Yee?
I have a question. It's kind of general, but when these trees are removed, where do they go? Sorry.
Chair Wiscombe, Youth Internee, it depends on how they decide to remove the tree. They haven't indicated how that's going to occur. However, there's 2 methods, basically. The tree possibly could be dug up, boxed, and relocated to a new location. In my opinion, that effort would not be very successful with this particular tree. The other method is to cut it and chop it up into a mulch that would be distributed somewhere for mulching purposes.
Ms. Longstreet.
I'd make a motion that we approve the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for 915 West Mission Street.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. I oppose. Opposed.
Okay. Mr. Farrar opposes. Ms. Jacobson, you voted in favor? Okay. Great. Okay. So motion carries. Let's move on to Chapala Street. Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, the 1300 block of Chapala Street came before this commission prior to this as part of a proposed project in that block. In looking at the area, the Street Advisory Committee determined that there are 4 blocks of the tree that we changed out at that meeting, and these other 3 blocks were not addressed. So they wanted to review those as well. The 11, 12, and 1400 blocks also have the sycamore trees that have the sycamore anthracnose that doesn't allow for normal growth of the tree. Again, it is not something that creates any hazards in the trees, and no trees are proposed for removal at this time. However, once the trees die or need to be removed for other reasons, it makes sense to change the designation to something that is not susceptible to disease. The committee is recommending the same recommendation for these blocks as they did the 1300 block to co-designate Corateria bipinnata, and I'm blanking on the common name, I'm sorry. I have the opposite problem. I remember the botanical names, but not the commons. And the Cedrella officialis for these 3 blocks. This designation, if approved, would allow for 4 contiguous blocks of the same designation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Downey. No public comment on this item. Questions? Discussion?
I think this is a fantastic recommendation. Eventually, as those sycamores go by the wayside, this would be wonderful.
I will say staff worked really, really hard on this. This was, they did their homework and really gave it a lot of thought and care.
Then I would move we accept the recommendation.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Downey. Okay, we are moving on to new business. Agenda item number 4, Creeks Division Program Update. Mr. Benson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Cameron Benson, and I am the manager of the Creek Restoration and Water Quality Improvement Division for the city. I'm going to be providing about half of the presentation tonight, and then I'd also like to introduce Jill Murray, who is the Creeks Division's Water Quality Research Program Coordinator, and Jill will deliver the second half of our presentation. We were having a little bit of technical difficulty tonight. We do have some video portions of our presentation. I hope they're going to work. The audio is going to be a little unusual. I'm going to have to use this microphone and put it down near the this laptop and see if we can transmit the audio to you. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. As you all are aware, the Creeks Division receives virtually all of its funding through Measure B 2000, which is a voter-approved 2% transient occupancy tax that funds a special fund for the Creeks Division that can only be used to pay for the 3 program areas that are defined in the municipal code and defined through that initiative that was on the ballot. The Creeks Division receives no general fund funding. The 3 program areas that the Creeks Division works on are water quality improvement, creek restoration, and education and outreach involving those 2 program areas.
And before you go on, I'm wondering, is it possible, I don't know what that feedback is from, but I'm wondering if we should try and switch to the other mic. Can we pull the other mic over and see if that solves the problem?
I'll pull it around, but I just moved the laptop an inch to the right, and
Okay.
it seems to have stopped. So
Okay, thank you.
we'll see.
Very distracting.
Measure B generates approximately $2.3 million a year for the Creeks Division program, and Creeks Division staff works very hard to leverage that funding with outside grant dollars to get the most funds we can for this community. To date, the program has averaged roughly $1 million a year in outside grant funding. And as recommended by the as recommended by the Creeks Advisory Committee, the funding is divided among the 3 program areas, as you see in the chart on the screen. About 50% of the funding goes to water quality improvement, 25% to creek restoration, and 25% to community outreach and education. The Creeks Division has a very ambitious and extensive capital program that for water quality improvement and creek restoration projects. We have approximately 20 projects in our 6-year capital improvement program, which our capital program is our largest budget line item every year in our budget. Our program over the next 6 years is expected to be $26 million. About half of that is Measure B funds matched equally with grant funding. So I'd like to highlight a few of the recently completed capital projects. First, I want to talk about the Upper Las Positas Creek Restoration and Stormwater Management Project. This project is located, as you can see from the picture, on the city's municipal golf course. And while that looks like a golf course to most people, to us it looked like the headwaters for Las Positas Creek, which is one of the major tributaries to Arroyo Burro. The project goals were to treat polluted urban runoff from the surrounding area. There's water that comes through storm drains onto the course from 3 different neighborhoods, as well as from Las Positas Road, and also from the course itself. The project is also designed to decrease flooding potential downstream along Las Positas Road and enhance wildlife habitat. We actually recreated the creek channels in this upper part of this watershed. This project gives us an opportunity to really maximize water quality and wildlife habitat outreach and education, because it is on the municipal golf course, which, as you all know, serves the community. And I think that the average amount of play on the course is about 60 to 70,000 rounds of golf per year. So that's a lot of people and a great opportunity for outreach. And another part of the project was to maintain course playability, both through construction but also after the project was finished. And I'm going to give this a try to play a video that City TV produced for Inside Santa Barbara about the project. Uh-oh.
Las Positas Creek Restoration and Stormwater Management Project is to treat that water before it leaves the property to improve water quality.
And the way that we do that is by slowing down the water, slowing down the runoff, allowing plants to naturally treat that water, either by uptaking nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, or
allowing the sediment that's carried by that runoff water to actually settle out. So just allowing the water to slow down enough for that sediment to drop out of the water column. And attached to that sediment, a lot of times, are molecules of bacteria, sometimes harmful bacteria. So by stopping that sediment from moving downstream, we can actually keep the harmful bacteria on the site and allow it to be actively treated by plants.
Okay, now let's see if I can get back. Oops. Oh boy. Can't just get in here. No. Boy. Okay. One thing I wanted to add about this project is we did receive a grant for the construction of this project through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act that funded the majority of the construction for the project. This is a photo we took at the end of last year, and after one of the large basins on the project was completely filled from all the rain we had in December and the runoff from the surrounding neighborhood. The next project I wanted to talk about was the Mission Creek Restoration and Fish Passage project at the Talent Road Bridge. This is on Mission Creek, obviously at the upstream end of Oak Park. It's a creek restoration project that will also help restore migration passage for the endangered steelhead trout. This is a federally endangered species. It's one of the most endangered species in the country. It's about 1% of its historic population still survives, and incredibly it survives in Mission Creek. And we have had steelhead attempting to migrate up Mission Creek to spawn in 7 of the past 10 years. This photograph was actually taken in lower Mission Creek of a fish approximately 30 inches long that was trying to come up the creek to spawn. I wanted to mention, the barriers for these fish and part of the problem with its survival are man-made barriers in the creek, usually concrete placed in the creek that creates problems with velocities and depth in the water. We have a lot of project partners for this project, the California Department of Fish and Game, NOAA, the Santa Barbara County Flood Control District. We've also worked with several other divisions and departments in the city, including Public Works and Wastewater and our Parks Division as well. And lastly, I wanted to mention the Environmental Defense Center has been a partner in this project, both with community organization and also providing some funding for the project. And I'm going to try this again. Regarding the grants, the design and construction of this project was largely funded through grants from the Department of Fish and Game and from NOAA. Oops. Oh boy.
Primary requirements for fish habitat: low toxicity, low temperature, and high dissolved oxygen content are the same parameters biologists have encouraged public agencies to honor for optimal water quality standards. In the end, what's good for the steelhead is actually good for humans too.
If you're able to have a species like that survive in your stream, then it's a pretty good indicator. That's why they call it an indicator species a lot of times, that the creek is in fairly good shape. In other words, the water quality is pretty good. We have a nice riparian canopy like we do here in much of the creek. There's upper areas where there's good food and good water for them, and that's a good way to be able to measure whether we're taking care of our local environment.
By taking care of our environment, hopefully many more people will have the opportunity to witness this unique species right in our backyard.
This is really challenging. Carla? It's not going forward. There we go. Let's try that. There we go. So we actually removed about 200 feet of concrete from Mission Creek here, and you can see from the bridge all the way down to the foreground of this picture is concrete. That large bump in the center is a sewer line that went through the creek bed, and we also were able to relocate the sewer line. So that's the before picture, and then that's what it looks like today. And third, you may have noticed throughout the city that we've been installing screens over all of the catch basin openings going into the storm drains through the city. Storm drains go directly from the curb here to the creeks and out to the ocean without any kind of filtration or treatment. So when trash and other debris gets into the storm drain, it goes straight into the creeks and out to the ocean. The trash has been identified by the Regional Water Board as a pollutant of concern in Santa Barbara, and the reason is there's a range of impacts to water quality. It's not just the aesthetic impacts, which are obvious, but trash can also act as a vector for disease. It can attach itself to metals and other pollutants that then contaminate the water. We received a federal stimulus grant for this project as well, which paid for almost all of the installation costs throughout the city. We expect to have this project finished and these installed citywide by the end of next month. And then lastly, I wanted to discuss a few of our outreach and education programs. One of the reasons that we expend so much resources for outreach and education is that our number one pollution source in Santa Barbara, like most urban communities, is what's called non-point source pollution. It's just urban runoff pollution. It comes from everywhere and from all of us. So in order to solve that problem, we need to educate the community about the sources of that contamination so that everybody can be part of the solution. The Creeks Division also administers the Stormwater Management Program, and this is a permit that the city holds under the Federal Clean Water Act that makes the city responsible for all of the runoff entering the storm drains, the creeks, and the oceans from the city, whether it's from public or private property. And so one of the things that we do an extensive public service announcement campaign. We do that through print, radio, and television, and I wanted to show you one of the television commercials that City TV produced for us recently.
No matter where you surf, your favorite wave begins right here, on your street. That's because storm drains lead straight to our creeks and ocean. When water washes into storm drains, pollutants like detergents, oil, and pet waste go along for the ride. Help keep our creeks and beaches clean. Take your car to a car wash and always pick up after your pet. Remember, the ocean begins on your street.
Okay, so now I would like to turn the presentation over to Jill Murray, who, as I mentioned, is our Water Quality Research Program Coordinator. And I'll get back into there.
Let's see. Okay, thank you, Cameron, and good afternoon. I apologize in advance if I start coughing. I am recovering from a cold. I'm going to start with a brief overview of what the Creeks Division does for research and monitoring, and then talk about focus on some projects and results that we've had in the past couple of years. The Creeks Division has a comprehensive watershed monitoring program, and we have a lot of research questions, and we try to always collect our samples in support of our research questions that are designed to work towards these goals. And first, we're trying to understand what are the levels of pollution in creeks and which compounds are the most problematic. Once we know what the levels of the pollutants are, we compare them to known standards and say, are these a problem for animals in the creeks? Are they a problem for people swimming in the creeks or swimming in the ocean downstream? We also strive to evaluate the effectiveness of any project that we put in and collect baseline data for future projects. And then if we know that we have a pollution problem, we try and work our way upstream to figure out how it's getting into the creeks and what are the sources and transport routes. And then we're always also collecting data to track long-term trends and see if water quality is getting better. So we collect samples from throughout all of our watersheds, and creek samples we collect from storm drains and lagoons and the surf zone. We test for a lot of different chemicals, metals and oil and pesticides and herbicides, and depending on the questions, different frequency from weekly to just storm sampling. So now I'll move on to some specific areas. For storm monitoring, we go out at least 3 times per year, and we always collect samples from the first storm of the year, called the first flush. And this generally has the highest concentrations of pollutants getting into the creeks because it's flushing off what is accumulated all year, all summer off of the streets. But fortunately, we generally find low concentrations of most pollutants in most of our sampling. And we also send samples out to a lab to test for overall toxicity to fathead minnows, because we don't always know what we're looking for, or we don't always know how different compounds might act in combination with each other. And we generally find in the creeks during storms low toxicity as well. We've tested for effects from the Jesucita fire and conducted very limiting sampling because of the flash flood warnings that came into effect as we were in the middle of sampling. We got out of there. But from what we looked at, we didn't see any harmful impacts. But one thing that has come up in the last couple of years is there's a newer class of pesticide. It's called pyrethroids, and they were developed after some of the other pesticides were phased out and banned in California about 10 years ago. And I think this is just an ongoing cycle. Anything that's toxic to insects is going to be toxic to aquatic organisms as well, and we're starting to find this in stormwater runoff and in some sediment in the estuaries. So we're concerned about this and starting to do more testing and some outreach. They're used really quite frequently in ant and termite control, so both residential and commercial. The next couple of topics are going to relate to beach warnings and indicator bacteria. So I wanted to give a little bit of background first for those of you that don't know, because we hear about the beach warnings a lot. But the county is required to sample every week at all of the beaches, the main beaches in Santa Barbara and throughout the county, but and test for 3 different kinds of indicator bacteria. And then if any of those exceed levels that are set by the state, that's when those warning signs are posted. And the reason why that is, these indicator bacteria are used, is they're always found in really high levels in sewage. And so they were thought to be indicative of sewage getting into the water. The problem is that it's becoming more and more clear that they are, well, first of all, most indicator bacteria are not, the vast majority are not harmful. They're only used to indicate sewage, but they're not pathogens themselves. And then it's becoming more and more clear that they're actually capable of growing, surviving, and even growing in the environment from storm drains to gutters. And so it's not an ideal indicator by any means. And so in some cases it's protecting people, telling people to stay out of the water when they shouldn't. And in other cases it might not be giving people clear information that they should stay out of the water. So the EPA is promised to come up with new criteria within the next year or 2. But it is the best, it's the technique that we have. It's the technique that we have years and years worth of data for. So the most common question that we get is water quality improving? And that's a really hard question to answer because the data is just so variable. But the largest data set that we have to work with is this beach data that's been collected weekly for 15 years. And then we hired a water quality intern in the past year to look at a lot of that data. And we had a couple of years ago, we had looked at the Heal the Bay report card grades that come out every year and looked and saw some slight improvement over the past decade. And so, that's just one grade for the whole year. So we want to go back and say, are the indicator bacteria levels actually getting better at the beaches over time? And it looks like, based on this analysis, that the number of warnings and the levels of the indicator bacteria did decrease for most of our beaches and most of the different indicator bacteria. So that is an improvement. However, the analysis did not include the data from last year when we had so much rainfall. So this is a graph of one indicator bacteria, the fecal coliform, over at Mission Beach in the surf zone, and you can see it looks like it's decreased over 15 years, but I'm sure there'd be a spike up for 2010. And then 2010 also brought a really high number of beach warnings at Arroyo Burro, and we got a lot of concern and curiosity from the public and people within the city. And so anytime we have, in the dry weather, anytime we have more than two or three beach warnings in a row, we scratch our heads, go look at the data. If we can't figure out what's going on, we go out and collect additional samples to figure out what's going on. But so for Arroyo Burro last year, there were 18 warnings during this required sampling season of April 1st to October 31st. And many of those were due to the late rains that we had last year. It was the highest number of warnings we've ever had in that time period, but other years had very, very close. I think 16 in 2008. But one thing we learned in that analysis with our water quality intern was that for all of our beaches that have a creek, the warnings are far likelier to occur when the creek is flowing out to the ocean. So sometimes that sand berm gets closed in front of the creek, and that acts like an excellent sand filter and takes out a lot of the indicator bacteria. So, excuse me. So last summer, the estuary was flowing out into the ocean all summer, partly from all the high rainfalls that we had and just the changes in wave activity. So you have to say, what's coming out of the creek that's so bad? All of the creeks have high indicator bacteria numbers, and Arroyo Burro is not the highest at all. Sycamore and Mission Creek generally have higher numbers than Arroyo Burro, and there was nothing unusual going on in 2010 there. But like I said, we do know that the indicator bacteria can grow in the estuary, even on the beach, on the decaying kelp. If indicator bacteria are growing, that's not harmful. A pathogen, something that harms humans, has to replicate within a human. And so this is just getting in the way of our understanding about whether we have any sewage contamination. So another project that tackles the questions about indicator bacteria and where they're coming from and do we have any kind of sewage getting into the beaches is our source tracking projects. And source tracking has two parts. It's finding out what kind of animal or human source would be producing the indicator bacteria, and then where is that coming from. And so we've worked for several years with Dr. Patricia Holden at UCSB. And in the past few years, we have had a grant from the state to develop a guideline of how to actually go upstream and up the storm drain networks and solve these problems, kind of trying to put the point in that non-point source pollution. And it's really tricky. We had another grant to study specifically the Laguna watershed area. I think I was out there sampling when I saw Commissioner Longstreet up there, right in front of her cottages. She came out clean. Her samples were fine. So in these two projects, we have nosy. In the two projects, we have found in some storm drains consistent low signals of human waste getting into the storm drain. And it's really hard to figure out how it's getting in there. It's basically a buried pipe with inputs that you can't see and maybe cracks that you can't see and leaking. And so we've continued to make progress on this. But we also were at a conference with our colleagues and saw at UCSB and saw a presentation about the world's only sewage sniffing dogs. And, we had really done a lot of hard work on this, and we were kind of stymied in some of our areas. We said, we need to get these dogs here, and we need to see if it really works, if the dogs really respond the same way that the DNA techniques are responding. And so we got another grant to bring them out here, and that was last summer, and I think it's the most fun I've had since taking this job. We had a great time. We had Sable and Logan, and they're human trainers. They've been trained to one barks and one sits when it smells sewage. They've been trained with human waste and soaps and surfactants, so it's not just specifically the human waste. And I think the video does a better job of explaining it than I can, so I'm going to try and start that.
Staff needed was an economical testing method that could provide results quickly. Enter Sable and Logan, two former shelter dogs with noses for, well, poop.
We have trained a couple of canines to sniff out environmental contaminants, right now specifically in stormwater. Their targets are human sewage and also detergents in the stormwater system, not just in the enclosed system, but also in the open channels.
Those noses caught the eyes of Murray and UCSB researchers at a recent conference.
I think everyone in the audience was excited about the idea. I don't think there was anyone else in the audience who had been out in the field taking all these manhole samples, trying to get faster results, and it just, the light bulb went off for us that if we had real-time results, we could really hone in on these problems a lot easier.
So Creek staff, along with the researchers, got a grant from the Water Environment Research Foundation to test the accuracy and effectiveness of these sewage-sniffing super sleuths.
We're going to some sites that we've tested before, so we know where we should see a positive response from the dogs or a negative response from the dogs. That helps us know how to use the method when we then go to places that we haven't tested before.
To get an idea of why dogs are so well suited for this work, consider this. The area of scent receptors in a human nose is roughly the size of a postage stamp. For dogs like Sable and Logan, it's the size of a Kleenex tissue.
I always use the beef stew analogy. If you walk into a house and somebody's making beef stew, you might recognize the smell of beef stew. But the dog walks into the room and they can pick out every single ingredient separately and define that within their brain as a recognized smell. And that's really the key to their success in doing this.
The dogs are trained to signal their handler when they detect sewage. For Sable, the signal is a bark. Logan sits down.
Generally what will happen is whoever the client is will have some idea of where they would like us to go and investigate. Depending on if it's an enclosed storm sewer system, we just open up the manholes or the sewer grates and just have the dogs smell from the surface. They don't go into any confined space areas.
If neither dog gives the signal of a positive detection, they move on to the next location. Total testing time, including travel, is minutes compared to days or weeks for the other important but more expensive testing methods.
Let's see. Is that good? Okay, but not yet, though. Okay. And when this video was made, we didn't have the laboratory results yet from UCSB, and we have since gotten the results and done the final report for the grant, but we had found a statistically significant match between the dog's responses and the DNA and chemical testing, so that's really neat, and the method is definitely going to reach a wider audience because of that grant and report. One of the things we did with the project was investigate the idea of leaking people dumping from recreational vehicles their bilge tanks into storm drains, and that's been a hypothesis that we've heard many times talking to the community, and we didn't find any evidence of that with the dogs, but we did find 2 leaking RVs, and one was fixed and one was removed shortly thereafter. That's it, and I'll take any questions, and also we have much more information on our website. We have our annual water quality reports and other papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benson and Ms. Murray. It was a great report. So questions or I'll start with you, Mr. Burns.
Yeah, three questions. The first one maybe it's obvious, but I don't know it. What is a fathead minnow test?
These are called whole water toxicity tests, and so we send the lab a couple of gallons of water, and they divide it into maybe 5 different jars and put a baby trout minnow in each jar and see if it survives. And if water is really toxic, they don't survive. But we have almost 100, between 90 and 100% survival for most of our samples. We've done a few storm drains where it has come back pretty toxic.
Another question, just on Talent Road, it looks like there's still fencing up there. Is that almost complete, or what's the status on that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Burns, the fencing that is up in Oak Park now is temporary fencing that is there to allow the plants to establish. Part of that project was to take out a lot of the ivy, German ivy, English ivy that were on the banks of the creek there. We planted over 1,200 native plants on the banks of the creek, and we're trying to get those established before they get stepped on and things. And so the fencing will be removed as soon as the plants are established.
And one last question. Do we have any results of how we're doing on keeping the water clean versus some of the cities that don't have a creeks program? Or I don't know if you've got that information, or you might have it later.
That is a very good question. It's hard. It's taken us kind of this much time to understand how we stand in comparison to other communities, and I don't think we could tell yet if we do quite well compared to a lot of more urbanized communities, but I don't know if that's because of the Creeks Division or because of everything that was put into the system beforehand.
Mr. Farrar?
Thank you, Chair Wiscombe. I have probably two questions, too. First, are we getting any steelhead up that passage yet? Have there been any noticed, or is it the correct time of year for them to go on up?
Yeah, you're right. It's Madam Chair, Commissioner Ferrara. It is a good time of year. We've had some great storms this year. The project at Talent Road was one of three that we've been working on with some of our project partners. There's an impassable barrier downstream from that project that is 2 concrete flood control channels about a mile long, and we're working on a separate project on those flood control channels to allow passage up through Oak Park. You're trying to get the fish up into the upper watershed. That's where you have the year-round pools. There's another barrier at Highway 192 bridge that we've been working on with Kachuma Operations Maintenance Board as well.
And my second question, basically, I think it's very serious, human waste being found in the storm drains, and I know you did mention that there's no evidence of dumping taking place, but is there a designated location that these RVs can go to get rid of their wastes? And if also a second part of that question, is the human waste you're finding near or below areas where RVs are parked?
Commissioner Ferrara, there is any RV can go to Marburg and dump for free. I don't know how many actually do that, but one thing I've learned every time we go and do this kind of investigations near the RVs, I try to talk to as many of the RV dwellers as I can, and having the dogs really facilitated that process. It was much easier to get information from people. But one thing I have heard is that most of the people do not use the facilities within their own RV because they don't function very well. So for the more rundown looking RVs, they're going to a public bathroom. Yeah. So for the places where they have been, where the consistent signal has been found in the storm drains, one of them was definitely not near any RV, and this was when we were with the dogs. We actually found the source of that one. That was really fulfilling. We found a leaking sewer line to storm drain and got that turned off. Fortunately, that was one where we had already put in a Creeks Division project, was a diversion that took that water, which we had known to be contaminated but didn't know what the source was, and connected it to the sanitary sewer during low flow. And then some of the other areas, some are in areas with RVs and some are not.
Okay, thank you. I do think it's important, though, that, somehow, because this is tied to us because the creeks could be affected from runoff, is that RV dwellers, I know they live in RVs, but I can't believe that they don't accumulate waste in there when they're in there during the night and so forth and so on. So, I mean, it really should be something that is looked into and made sure that they're dumping it in their proper places.
Yeah, we found 2 leaking tanks, so there's evidence right there.
Thank you.
Can I
Okay.
add one answer to the other question?
Any comments down here? No? Okay. I want to just commend the program on the amount of grants you get. It always astounds me when I actually see the hard numbers, and it's really great the work you're doing, and how much of that is how much of the money comes from grants to do the kind of work that you're doing, and it's really great. It was an excellent report, and we appreciate it, and the audio worked out fine. I thought that was pretty cool that you showed us. No, thank you both very much. It's great.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, I think we're going to have to switch items, agenda item number 5 and 6 around, if that's okay, because we have a time certain item at 5:30, and I think if the audience doesn't mind, if the commission could take a 3-minute break and then. To agenda item number 6, which is the Cabrillo Ball Field improvements. I think we're going to have we have quite a few speakers, and we're going to have a staff presentation, and then any clarifying questions from the commission, and then that will be followed by public comment, and then we'll have commission discussion and recap. Ms. Rapp?
So, Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, I'm very pleased to see a good number of people here. This is part 2 of our continuing discussion of the Cabrillo Ball Field. We have kept you informed on the projects that we've had going on there, in particular the fencing and some of our challenges. And in doing our outreach with the community, there was a great community desire to talk about what other improvements could be made at Cabrillo Ball Field, and they started to share some of their ideas. So we are now bringing this discussion to the Commission. We've asked people to come tonight and share their perspectives and their ideas as community members, as park users, and the intent of the presentation and the discussion of the item tonight is to give some background on what our options, what are the things that are structuring our options, so what are some of the challenges we're dealing with, and in terms of other ideas that we might consider in the future for the Cabrillo Ball Field. We'll hear some of those, and we'll look forward to the commission discussion of what they hear. And then we'll look at some next steps. The intent tonight is simply to gather information. And from there, staff will take it back and determine what our next steps are. It is, of course, a challenging time to talk about park improvements because there is such limited funding. However, never say never. So with that, we want to have a great discussion today. We hope that a lot of your questions are answered, and we sincerely appreciate everyone who is here to share their ideas. This is the right forum. So with that, I've asked Assistant Director Jill Zachary to lead this item.
Commissioner Wiscombe, Chair Wiscombe, and Commissioners, I will be providing the staff presentation. I'd also like to note that Santos Escobar, Parks Manager, is here to answer any questions for the Commission. He manages this facility. And then we also have Lieutenant Fledging from the Santa Barbara Police Department, who's available to answer any questions and give you information on how activity at the ball field has changed since we made the recent improvements, if you'd like that. So with this presentation, and there's about 14 slides, so about 15 minutes, that's the plan. We're going to review some background about Cabrillo Ball Field, talk about its current use, what we do currently for park maintenance, the challenges that we face there, some of the recent improvements, potential improvements, some cost estimates and funding options, and then the next steps. This closely follows your staff report. So Cabrillo Ball Field, the land was acquired by the city between 1925 and 1927. It was part of a series of purchases along the waterfront that led to the amazing amount of public open space that we have down there. It's about 5 acres. It was originally developed as a ball field, so that's what it's been used as since its inception. Improvements that you see today were largely made in the late 70s and the early 80s. Fencing and the restroom, those types of things, which turned it into what it is today. Some additional improvements have been made since then, such as when we were at the site visit yesterday, the sidewalk along Cabrillo Boulevard, which connects it with other sidewalk in the waterfront area. The chromatic gate we mentioned, it is within the park. It's not part of the active ball field. However, it is an art feature there that was installed in 1991, and it is also an example of a need at the park that needs refurbishment. So Cabrillo Ball Field is considered one of the premier softball fields in the Santa Barbara South Coast. It's used by Major League Softball, Pony Baseball. There are weekend softball tournaments. There's drop-in activities. People can drop in and use the field if it's not being programmed. You'll see soccer there. You might see softball there, ultimate frisbee. You'll see people walking dogs. Sometimes you'll see people who are visiting Santa Barbara having picnics in the larger park area. Park maintenance, what we do there, we spend about 20% of our time maintaining the turf for ball field use. The rest of the time is spent litter pickup, sidewalk cleaning, maintaining the bleachers, some of the horticulture work that we do there. I would note that the restroom is only open now during permitted use. Prior to that, we did have it open for the public, and one of our budget reduction measures was to close it, and then when we actually began to have public discussions about reopening the restroom, some of the other issues and the growing desire for us to really take a look at Cabrillo Ball Field resulted in a recommendation that we keep it closed generally. Next slide. So the park challenges, which Ms. Rapp mentioned a little bit, which is part of the reason why we're here today, over the last, for the last 30 years, there's history of people, transient population, homeless folks, people passing through Santa Barbara, taking advantage of the wonderful public waterfront that we have. Cabrillo Ball Field is one of the public parks where they have been known to spend time. But in the last probably 6 years, we had increasing issues at the ball field, particularly around the bleachers, the restroom, the dugout area. People were spending a lot of time there engaging in illegal activity, drug use, and other illicit activity, and exhibiting aggressive behavior that made the park and the ball field increasingly unsafe to the public. At the same time, Cabrillo Ball Field's been challenged by its infrastructure, partly because of its location next to the coastal ocean and the groundwater level, but also in that over time, we don't always have enough funds to really maintain our facilities the way we would like to maintain them. Now, today, we have ongoing problems with drainage related to the storm drains. The decline in park maintenance funding has limited the types of improvements that we're able to do there. So as things are in decline, they go on the wish list of what we would like to fix when the opportunity comes up. Some of the other issues that we have is the ball field poles and lights are aging. We've determined, working with our facilities division and public works, that it's a priority to replace those from two reasons: a safety reason, just longevity, and also to try to increase the city's energy savings. Over the last number of years, we've successfully swapped out inefficient lights, light fixtures, and resulted in energy savings. We also identified the restroom a number of years ago as in need of renovation. It needs a new roof. It was constructed in 1981. It's about time that it was refurbished. So as a result of the activity that we've had at the ball field, we saw reduced park use. Families unwilling to have their children there and in youth programs. The general public not feeling welcome, either walking by or spending any time in the ball field. And then also it impacted adult sports programs too. We had increasing issues with unsanitary conditions, our staff spending a lot of time cleaning up things that generally wouldn't be something that you'd expect to find in a public park, which led to increased park maintenance costs, and also unsafe work conditions for our park staff, which is something that's been a concern for us all along as well. And as I mentioned before, through budget reductions, the restroom was closed to the public. As Ms. Rapp mentioned, in August 2010, we had a meeting with a number of stakeholders, and that was to discuss what was going on at the ball field, options to improve the ball field, to discuss the issue with the restroom, and it included area hotels and business owners, Casa Esperanza, Major League Softball, Pony Baseball, Santa Barbara Police Department, the Franklin Center some members from the Franklin Center Advisory Committee. Subsequent to that, the mayor had a meeting with the Milpas Community Association, and the ball field was one of a number of topics of discussion, and the desire that we look at ways to improve it, make it more friendly to the public, and find ways to refurbish it. And then lastly, at an Eastside community meeting in the summer as well, in a discussion about the various Eastside community issues, the ball field was raised at that meeting. So in the summertime, as we began to sort of peel back the layers of the ball field, we were about to engage in installing the fence that's currently around the bleachers and the restroom. That was a project that was funded by a community development block grant that we actually applied for last year, but it takes about 9 months, 10 months for the funding to become available. We wanted to look at on a broader basis at the ball field based on public input and public desire, and based on our assessment, if we had the opportunity to renovate the ball field, to implement park improvements, what are the range of things that we think could be considered with the idea that the ball field would be refurbished in its entirety. So the list that we have for you really tries to be comprehensive. I mentioned earlier the restroom renovation. One of the issues that has come up actually as early as the mid-1990s is the desire to have a fence for the home run area for the ball field, to delineate the ball field. We include mow strips because that's the only way we'd be able to maintain a fence that was in the middle of a field. Mentioned the poles and the lights. The chromatic gate is in need of refurbishment, and the lighting needs to be repaired. We are talking to the County Arts Commission about their interest in doing that, and they've initiated a process to raise some private funds towards the gate renovation, but not necessarily the lights. Landscaping, there are places in the park that we could improve, make it more open, more aesthetically pleasing. I mentioned earlier also the drainage issues. One of the key things we'd absolutely have to resolve there to look at any new uses at the ball field is drainage. We have drainage considerations, and I have a slide that shows where the storm drains are right now. And then lastly, again, in response to public interest and community desire, explore potential new uses for the ball field. And that's where we anticipate a lot of the discussion will be today for the Commission and the public. Oh, it didn't work. Okay. Here is the site plan, and I apologize I can't point because this won't work with that screen, but if you look to the top of the slide, It shows where the new fence, the existing fencing is, around the restroom, the bleachers, the dugout area. As you follow towards Cabrillo Boulevard and you see the lights, they're sort of circles with little dots around them, those are where the ball field lights. In red, which unfortunately is a little faint on this, that shows a potential location for a perimeter fence around the ball field. And then as you go to sort of, let's pretend north is up, the southwest corner of the ball field, that's the area where lots of discussion has been about potential other uses. And then in the corner, closest to the corner of Cabrillo Boulevard and Calle Puerto Vallarta is where the chromatic gate is. Next slide. So again, unfortunately, this did not translate into a good slide, but if you can see the circles in the bottom of the park and the blue lines, both near the chromatic gate and along the edge of Cabrillo Boulevard, and then also at the corner of Milpas and Cabrillo Boulevard. That shows where there is storm drain infrastructure at the park. And from the center of the park toward the hotel, Fess Parker's hotel, is where water is intended to drain. It's supposed to go under Calle Puerto Vallarta, enter another drain, and then get carried back across Cabrillo Boulevard to the East Beach drain. In the far corner of Milpas and Cabrillo Boulevard, there's another drain. We've done some preliminary review of this area, and in some cases, the drains themselves are not functioning. In other cases, we'd have to do some more exploration. The good news is that there is some drainage system, but that's a key factor, one of the first things we'd have to look at very carefully before we explored additional uses. Next slide. So we included in your staff report and also in the PowerPoint presentation some of the ideas that we've heard from members of the community about taking the area that's outside of the active ball field that could be programmed for a new use. They include a children's playground, adult exercise equipment, basketball courts, off-leash dog park, or some sort of small pocket park that would encourage more people to spend time at the park and thereby continue to discourage activity that makes the park unsafe and unclean. Our cost estimates, we've spent some time in the last couple of months refining our cost estimates. I won't go through these in detail. It could total almost $900,000 if we were to do everything. One of the things that we'll talk about when we talk about potential funding sources, and one of the strategies that our department uses when it looks at park improvement projects, is how we find ways to do the first three, and then we get to the second two, and then we might have different funding resources depending on the element of the project. Rather than it being an all-or-nothing proposition, there may be things that we can pursue on a piecemeal basis. Next slide. So funding options, as Ms. Rapp indicated, it's not the greatest time to find outside funds. The city's general fund is not flush, so the chances of having general fund resources for the project are not great. Any elements of these projects would compete with other departments that also have general fund needs. The project area is within the city's redevelopment agency area, and we have been communicating with RDA about the potential for this project. Unfortunately, there's a lot of uncertainty right now regarding RDA funds, so there's no guarantee there either. We did get a $25,000 community development block grant for the new fencing that was recently installed. That's another source of funds based on the location. Recently we heard that's a funding source that may be challenged in the near future because it's federal funding. It comes from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And then lastly, community fundraising. It is an option. We haven't done any work to identify whether it's really feasible. We do know the County Arts Commission is looking for private donations for the chromatic gate, and that's great. That's wonderful that they're able to do that, and we'll work with them to help them as we can. Other grant sources, we currently don't have any, but that doesn't mean there wouldn't be ones in the near future. It's a project that we would always keep on our radar if a funding source came along. So next steps tonight, as we indicated, is opportunity for more public input, discussion by the Commission. Based on the discussion we hear tonight and some additional work that we would need to do, we would go back and do more work as staff, looking at the site conditions, assessing feasibility of different options, and then come back at a future date with more information for the Commission. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zachary and Ms. Repp. Okay, we're going to open it up from any commissioners clarifying questions to staff. Anyone have questions? Mr. Ferrara?
Yes, I do have one question. My question would be, in the center of the park, I didn't notice any drainage for the center of the park. Is there any existing draining for where the water actually collects the most right now? And if not, would some of those, what are those, sewage lines or be able to be moved over to the center where most of the accumulation is at? Of water when it accumulates?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Ferrara, that is one of the things that we would evaluate. So one of the needs that we have is to just complete a comprehensive survey of the existing elevations and then evaluate a range of options, whether through grading and adding of soil we can change the grade in certain areas and encourage water to go toward existing drains, whether there would be a recommendation to add drains. We would look at different options based on what we wanted to achieve, and we would take into consideration, first and foremost, what it would cost to do any of those. Chances are, through grading, we might be able to improve aspects of the ball field.
And I have one more clarifying question, too. Does the lowest location within the park area there, is the ocean lower or higher than that point?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Ferrara, it really depends on where you are in the park, and it depends on how much rain we've had and surf. It's a whole variety of conditions. I will say we do have 2 seawater monitoring wells in the park that are federal wells. We don't have any information about them, but they are there to monitor the intrusion of seawater in this location. And that's one of the challenges we have here as well, is the groundwater levels. It's the fact that it's adjacent to the coastal ocean, and as sea level rises, we'll have to consider those factors as well.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, thank you very much again for that. Okay, we're going to open it up for public comment. We will give everyone 2 minutes, and I have a little clock up here, so I'll remind you when you get close to your time. And I will start out with, this is an email. I guess I should just read this, or I was asked to
I
read
don't
it.
think that we had anybody who was able to be here from Pony Baseball. Is that correct? I'm not seeing anyone.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The email is from Sam Kaiser.
Yes, it is.
With, and we should start using their new name. And I was surprised to hear it had been 2 years. But with Pony Baseball. Thank you.
Santa Barbara Youth Baseball, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this is from Sam Kaiser, and I'm going. Okay. Please express on Santa Barbara Youth Baseball's behalf that thanks to Nancy Rapp, Rich Hanna, Jeff Smith, and Santos Escobar, the Cabrillo fence seems to be having its intended effect on the absolute mess and danger that previously existed at the field. Our teams have found it a welcome change from the aggressive confrontational and foul-mouthed drunks and druggies that used to be there intimidating our young players and families. In addition, it's nice to play on a field that does not contain unpleasant surprises like piles of human excrement and trash. B, Santa Barbara Youth Baseball intends to be an active participant in proposed upgrades and improvements to Cabrillo, with the vision of fully returning it to a safe and welcoming environment for use by law-abiding members of our community. Okay, so that's that correspondence, and now we'll move on to this. We'll hear first from Matthew Levine. Okay, and then that'll be followed by Sebastian Aldana. Okay, let me turn this on. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Matthew Levine. I'm the General Manager at the Fess Parker Doubletree, so right across the street. So I've been here for 2 years and have had the pleasure of seeing what's been going on there. And I really want to thank Nancy and her team for organizing and getting that fence up there. It has done wonders to piggyback off what the youth baseball feels as a commissioning, and also for the police department and their active duty and really policing that whole area. As far as improvements, a lot of things I'm going to be repetitive because I agree with a lot of the things that were said on those slides. Continuing the fencing along that area, adding a playground to encourage family usage, I think is really key. Especially for our resort, we have a lot of families utilize that, stay with us, and it would be very beneficial to that. I would also like to see, with the whole arch that's there, the gate, so to speak, maybe add something a little more historical value to it to actually encourage tourism to come by and see something, maybe something that reflects of old Santa Barbara, so we get some more value out of that than just some rainbow arch that really no one understands why it's there, to be quite frank. So I'm all about art, but let's get some other things so we can get some tourism over there as well. I like the one thing that the police was able to do and prohibit RV parking on one side of the street. I like to encourage to do that further around the whole ball field. The RVs that park there generally are not up to snuff. They do encourage more drug use. I've spoken many times with our local police about that. It would be great to even enhance that along Cabrillo Boulevard. I don't know what the purpose of allowing RV parking right along the beach, and when we have one of the most beautiful parts of this city, and we see these old RVs there. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We have RV parking in other locations that are designated for RV parking. So all that area would be great. And, of course, fixing the flooding, because without that, you're not going to be able to go any further than that. But thank you for your time, and appreciate you guys considering this. And I know, like Nancy said, money is tight, but anything we can do to improve that area would be fantastic.
Thank you very much. You did it in exactly 2 minutes.
Hello,
Okay.
My name is Sebastian Aldana.
Yes, well,
I'm going to beat you. Okay, what I wanted to do was turn in a report of a chart that we had when we did a cleanup on October 16th, and the cleanup ended at the Cabrillo ball field, and there was 10 people that wanted a basketball court. I'm going to be repeating some, but and there were 7 that wanted a track, 9 that wanted a farmer's market, 6 an outdoor gym, 7 a handball court, 11 wanted a children's playground, maybe like a mini, what's that park, Kids World on Mediterranean. There was talk of a concession stand, dog park. There was 9 people for a dog park, hot dog cart and coffee cart. And also, there was back in September, there was an informal survey at the Franklin Center, which they also wanted a basketball court, track, and handball. And I just wanted to turn that in.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We'll hear from Teresa Pena, followed by Kurt Pickering. Welcome.
Hello. Hi. I was here because I was at one of those community East Franklin advisory. Sorry, I'm nervous. And so I went home and I polled my 3 sons who are 20, 24, and 18. And I said, you guys, the Cabrillo ball field, what would you think of something there that would enhance the park? And they said, well, first of all, get all those people out of there that don't belong there. And secondly, basketball courts. A lot of times if they want to play basketball, they have to go to the schools to do it, and a lot of times they're locked at night and they're not lit. And the other thing that came up was around the perimeter of the entire field is to put in a jogging or walking track, because we often go to Santa Barbara City College to the track to walk around it, and so we have to drive over there because we live on this side of town and it's way on the other. So maybe to put something around that track where people could either jog around it and it's lightly lit so it doesn't disturb the homes and the hotel, but so it's just kind of people can see where they're running, would be beneficial. A lot of the neighborhoods that are on the east side are either poorly lit or there's no lighting at all, so it makes it kind of impossible to walk at night in our own neighborhoods. And then one of the other ideas that came up was take out the rainbow chromatic gate and relocate it somewhere else, because I've lived in Santa Barbara all my life, and when that went up, it was kind of like so many people, friends and family, were like, what? A rainbow gate? Okay, well, how does that represent Santa Barbara? That doesn't even belong there. And instead, put in some sort of a play water feature for small children, like they have similar to Disneyland, where they have the water that shoots out of the ground. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we have Kurt Pickering. Is Kurt Pickering here? Yes. Okay, great. And then followed by Anthony Giovanacci.
Hi, my name is Kurt Pickering. I've lived here for 22 years. I've been teaching basketball to local youth for over 15 years, and I also, at this time, operate the Santa Barbara Breakers. I'd like to speak on behalf of a proposal for basketball courts as well. And at this time, I've counted over 19 sports, and this is not a criticism, but in our beautiful beachside area, over 19 sports, but at this time, no basketball. Certainly not the fault of anyone in this room. It's just, it's never been there, and I think it's time. And if you go to San Roque High School, they have built beautiful courts there, aesthetically gorgeous. The surfaces are real clean, durable, and the fences are see-through. And so it's very important to me. I don't want to drive through there where there's an eyesore or something kind of blocking the view. And so if you look at San Roque's courts, it's a see-through fencing that will not obstruct the view of our beautiful ocean. And not opposed to what the miss said before me, but, if basketball courts were there, we wouldn't be asking for playing ball 11, 12 o'clock at night. If there's no lighting, the fact that it ends at 5:30, 6:30, the beauty is that basketball, really attracts, it does not discriminate against age, sex, race, height, weight, quickness, in my case, slow. But it appeals to everyone, and I really believe what it's going to do is attract quality people, quality time there. There's nothing more beautiful when you drive by Laguna Beach, and you're driving by there, and there's basketball courts, and it's a positive, fun energy, and so that just adds to the quality of life. And the activities that can be available there.
Great.
So,
You'll need to wrap up.
Okay. And last point I'd like to make, the best news for this is I have contacted some gracious people here in town, and for this project to go forward, it would cost the city absolutely nothing. So, and I can give support to that if you need that.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. We really appreciate it. Okay. I mispronounced your name. Giovanni.
Perfectly.
I
You
did?
just said it slowly, but you said it perfectly.
I'm supposed to say it quickly, so okay. you'll be, following you will be Terry Tyler, just so we know. Welcome.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Commission, I am here on behalf of the Santa Barbara Youth Football League here in Santa Barbara. I represent about 450 kids, over 150 coaches, and hundreds of families in Santa Barbara that really need your help. I see what's going on with this field right now as a tremendous opportunity for the city to really help out the Santa Barbara Youth Football League, which has been in existence since 1971. It really has had no place to reside. The high schools locally have bent over backward to accommodate the Youth Football League, giving us a place to play, a place to practice. I currently serve on the board of directors with the Santa Barbara Youth Football League. I've also coached for the last 8 years in the 13 and 14 year level. And really, I think that the Santa Barbara Youth Football League, more than any other sport, is necessary for the youth in this town, strictly for the demographic. I think that basketball is well taken care of in this town. I think they have the boys clubs. There's a lot of open courts. Baseball, obviously, adult and youth. We have the Page Center. We've got Dwight Murphy, Pershing Park, Las Positas Park. Softball is well taken care of, but football really has no place to be. City College, as of late, has become unavailable because of the renovations they've done there to their fields. And I think that the city really has a great opportunity here to help out a lot of the kids in this town that really have been exemplified or really shown and presented on local media, or statewide media for this town. I don't know if you are all aware, but we've had a team come from this town of 13, 14, and 15-year-old kids that have gone and competed nationally as a youth football program and represented this town nationally. And when people from other towns and other places come here to watch us play or to play us, they're surprised, to be frank, that the kids don't have a place to play. And every year as a board, we struggle a lot to find the kids a place to practice and a place to play. And I think that without saying too much, I'd really like the commission here to really deliberate on that and really think about the tremendous opportunity you have here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate your coming. Okay, Terry Tyler is followed by Sharon Byrne. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a longtime Santa Barbara resident. I'm a retired CPA here in town. And I've played softball on that field for many a year, and I think softball is great there and should be the #1 use, but I do think you could share that field with football and possibly soccer. But more importantly, that area that we were talking about by the chromatic arch, I stepped that off the other day, and it looks to me like there's about 75 yards from where that outfield fence would be that's usable over to the arch. That's a big space, 225 feet. That goes across the outfield and comes back on the other side like a triangle. Now, in my mind, the best use for that property would be, and it's been mentioned, would be Kids World. That's something that was done at very minimal cost to the city. The Chamber of Commerce got donated materials. The Contractors Association donated labor. I suspect some neighboring businesses might help out with some contributions. And I think that could solve a lot of problems. I think the east side is really lacking in park space. That could be a real opportunity to give them a place to take the children to play, because Kids World downtown is often very crowded on the weekends. I don't know if you get over that way. It's hard to park in that vicinity, and the facility's really being overutilized. But I think if you get some businesses to partner with you, you could put Kids World in there, and I do think there'd also be enough space for a couple of basketball courts, which apparently someone has already found monies for. So I'd be encouraging you to partner with the community businesses to get this done on the cheap. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, Sharon Byrne is going to be followed by Beatrice Molina.
Hi, my name is Sharon Byrne. Thank you.
I don't envy you your job tonight. You're going to get some great pitches and great ideas. I'm going to give you another one. Even though I love children, I would not necessarily advocate for a child's playground in that park. And the reason is because there is one of the best playgrounds in the city, along with the carousel, just 2 blocks down the beach over at Chase Palm Park. So my kid played there a lot, and it was magic land. I'd like to advocate for handball courts there, and I'll tell you why. That was one of the items that came up in our community cleanup and also in our Franklin meeting that had some interest. You may or may not know, but there is no official handball court anywhere in this city, and yet there are a great deal of men and young boys that play it. Right now, one of their favorite places, or one of the only available places, is the West Side Boys and Girls Club. And that also happens to be the jump-in point for the West Side Gang. So it's not necessarily the safest park for kids to be playing in. One of the handball players that is there regularly, I had an opportunity to shoot a short documentary film of him a year and a half ago, and I was really amazed at what I saw. They're sharing that court with basketball players. It's not a real handball court. It's just a wall they throw a ball against. It's always packed. There's always a queue waiting to play handball, and some of these guys are so good that they play tournaments in other states. But there's no place to have a tournament here. The U.S. Handball Association would actually book tournaments into the city, which would be good for the hotel district, the food eateries on Milpas, the markets, if we had a legitimate handball court, and one at Beachside is amazing. There is one down at Venice Beach. That's one place that a lot of people play tournaments. It is always graffiti-free, which is pretty amazing given Venice's look. I'm sure you've had a good look at it. At the same time, the handball players that use the West Side Boys Club often recruit gang members out to come and play handball. And they help keep some of the kids that are being targeted from actually getting jumped in. So for that reason, I would very much like to advocate that we get an official, real handball court here in the city of Santa Barbara, that we host tournaments in it, and that we keep it hopping with youth all the time. Be a great use for that park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Beatrice Molina is followed by Stephen Romanowski.
Hi.
Welcome.
I would like to kind of change a little bit of the direction. First, I want to say that definitely this park belongs to our youth, especially in that area, because there are so many limited resources. We have families from very low incomes in that neighborhood, and and that is going to take me to the issue that I want to address. Many, because of the situation economically, are now limited to walking instead of cars. And one of the issues why I got involved with MCA was because families were coming to complain to me that every time they walked on that Milpas to the beach, because that was their source of recreation, they were harassed. Okay, some of that has now been improved. That has not gone totally away. There are still a lot of homeless people there. There is still a lot of harassment. In the summer, when people are walking to the beach, we have to have better lighting on that Milpas. And if you talk to the owners of the motels from that side toward the duck park on that side, people are afraid to walk there. And so the main issue I think we need to deal with is safety and accessibility. So I would like to recommend lighting, and then, of course, the other issues that have been said today. On another issue, my name is B. Molina, as I said. My father was Antonio Molina, and was the founder of the Sister Cities Puerto Vallarta 30 years ago with a number of other individuals. And because of the work that they did in the creation of Sister City, which is a very powerful organization here, and one of the most powerful in California, if you go on the website and you'll see the history, I would like to advocate that that corner has a legacy of strong cultural, historical activities, not just of Santa Barbara, but the relationship of Puerto Vallarta with Santa Barbara and what the exchange has meant for many, many people and all the people who have benefited from it. And as you know, on the wharf, that fountain and those dolphins came from Puerto Vallarta. I would like to recommend that that corner needs to, again, come back to that cultural and represent Santa Barbara in a better light and more focused toward the community it's there. And please don't get rid of Calle Puerto Vallarta, because that has a legacy that it is very powerful. And it's very sad that all of us don't understand why it was even created. And those are my comments.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, Stephen Romanowski, followed by our final speaker, who is Joan Dixon. Is that right? John Dixon. Sorry. Okay. I would have realized that when you came up. Welcome.
Thanks for having this forum. I just heard about it like at 4 o'clock, so I didn't have time to prepare anything particularly cogent, but I just wanted to, so he already added some stuff about the basketball court, but I just wanted to add a couple things about it. A lot of it's echoing him. I've lived here for about 8 years, and years before that, I was 4 years as an undergrad, and it's been something near and dear to my heart, and a lot of my friends as well, that Santa Barbara has a real dearth of public basketball courts, and particularly near the beach. I remember between my 2 stints here, I lived in Los Angeles for a number of years, and there was just a wonderful community building feeling at like the Venice and Santa Monica beachside courts for like recreational players, even people coming to watch them. And I think it could be the same here. I think there would be a palpable excitement in many parts of the community if there was word got out that there was a beachside basketball court going in. I understand, as has been mentioned a few times, it's budgetary constraints, of course, but I worked in nonprofit fundraising here for about 8 years, first at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, so actually I know the sort of untold story behind the chromatic gate. There's an urban legend, at least at the art. Anyway, it's not important. And now it's a Laguna Blanca school. And it seems that there's, at least if there's a new court, there's a real naming opportunity for a philanthropic citizen, which is a lot of stuff that we do in fundraising. And I would gladly donate my time or any experience I have with that if that was going to happen. And also the last thing, I didn't get to prepare anything really, but there's traveling tours, like the AVP does events, say at East Beach, and that's a revenue-generating event for the city, I'm sure. And there's like the And One tour, which is sort of a youth exhibition tour for basketball. I think Nike sponsors it, but I didn't really get a chance to look it up. Santa Barbara's a destination city for tourism, and a beachside basketball court could possibly bring in events like that. Anyway, so that's all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Before you leave, we never turn down an offer to help with fundraising, so you can leave me your information.
Only for basketball court, though.
I got that. We could inspire you other ways.
Be careful, Nancy may chain you to your seat for... Okay. Welcome, John Dixon.
Thank you. I'm John Dixon from Tri-County Produce on Milpa Street, ground zero right across the street from home plate. So we get to see the beautiful view of Cabrillo Ball Field and the beachfront every single day, as many of you that shop at my store get to look out when you leave, and everybody says, what a wonderful view. We all know that in recent years how bad the Cabrillo Ball Field has changed to become very unsafe, unhealthy conditions with many illegal behaviors going on. And we even had to put locks on our bathrooms at the store and issue keys to customers because of the problems associated. But I would like to say a big, huge thank you to Parks and Rec, Nancy and Santos, as well as the police department for the heavy patrolling in the area that was going on. And all of that has made significant improvements, as we all know, to the ballpark. So I'm very, very thankful for what that has done, and at less than half the cost of spending $50,000 to move a couple of benches somewhere else. So I thank you for that. Since the fencing project, I've spoken with several softball players who appreciate the changes. One woman who says, now I can bring my daughter to the games with me. Before I couldn't do that, so she's also very appreciative of that issue. Now it's great to see additional considerations towards making this waterfront landmark everything it can and should be, as there's a lot of great things that can happen. I'm not sure at this point what the best solution is. Kids World, YFL, basketball, horseshoe pits wasn't mentioned. I don't do horseshoes, so I'm not an advocate for it. That was just one idea. But I think it can be, become a very vibrant, well-used park by our community, which I think is great. Last comment, quickly, on the flooding issue. I wrote a letter to the city of Santa Barbara when the roundabout was put in, I think about 10 years ago on Milpa Street. And I looked at the plans and I said, why do we have two 48-inch pipes, drain pipes, coming from the roundabout down Milpa Street in front of my store? That's 96 inches of drainage when it rains. And it ends in a culvert box in the intersection in front of my store that's 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet, and there's 24 inches that go out. I said, isn't that going to be flooding with 96 inches in and 24 out? One of the things I was told was the park was part of the solution to deal with some of the flooding controls, and it would cost $250,000 at the time to make the flooding go all the way out to the ocean, and they didn't want to spend that in the budget. But anyway, that was then, so it'll cost a lot more now. I agree with the RV parking issue. I think that also needs to be addressed, as Matthew said. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Okay. That closes public comment. We appreciate all the comments, some really great ideas, and good thought-provoking material.
Chair Wiscombe, before the commission begins their discussion, I do want to make one comment, because there were a lot of compliments on the improved conditions at the Cabrillo Ball Field. And it's important that everyone understand that the problem has just moved from Cabrillo Ball Field, because we are now getting complaints on a daily basis from homeless transient types that are hanging out on East Beach and harassing some of the folks that play volleyball there and visit the East Beach Grill and some of those other areas. And we're also seeing an increase in problems in Chase-Baum Park. So it's really important. This was the fencing project at Cabrillo Ball Field thus far has been successful in accomplishing what our priority was, which was to protect those facilities for the children and adults that play ball there. But we do have a continuing problem in our other park areas. So I just had to mention that, because I think it's important to recognize that we've been successful at Cabrillo, and we're talking about other changes that we can make to make it a better facility for the community. But we have just shifted the problem to other park areas. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rapp. We should also mention that the commission did acknowledge that the commission did receive 2 written communications on from people that could not make it tonight. So we have those. I can't find one of them. One of them is from Celeste and Ken Barber. And the earlier letter that we got, does anyone have a copy of that, just so we can...
But it was regarding basketball, that
one?
We were emailed that. It's okay.
Yeah, I made a copy of it, but for some reason I can't find it. So, okay. So now we will open it up to the commission for discussion. And I'm going to start down at this end. Mr. Casebeer.
I'm very excited for especially the residents of the Lower East Side. This is, I've been involved with youth athletics for many, many years. I played volleyball at East Beach, and I feel like we have an opportunity to maximize the use of this field. And tonight, I'll be honest, I'm an advocate for the basketball courts. I think that's great, but it sounds like perhaps we could add a few other activities. And so the door's open, and I'd like to keep this enthusiasm going. I'm going to excuse myself. I have another event that I'm late to right now, but thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Casebeer. Did you? Oh, Ms. Longstreet?
It is exciting to start planning this process. And although we know we don't have the resources to complete it at this time, I believe once you have plans in place, you're ready to go when the funding's available. I think the area, well, first off, we have been short of fields since I joined this commission 16 years ago, and we got our first field study report. So we have to maximize the use of any fields we have available. And this, you know, as we did our site visit last night, this is not only softball, but we watched soccer players playing, So we need to keep this programmed all the time. I think there may be an opportunity. I don't see it changing from a softball field, but it may be able to accommodate the other sports we're talking about, field sports, like YFL. And we need to look at that. And that's about programming and the time of year and scheduling who's got field use. Now, the triangle down at the other end, I think we're going to be able to maximize the use of that for quite a number of people, whatever it turns out to be it, we've had a request for basketball for years. We had a proposal for courts down on the beach that never went anywhere. We know this is something that has a great deal of community interest. What else can we get there? We don't know. I don't think until we get some of the grading and those issues worked out can we see what fits in there. But I think the maximum use is what's important. Just to have as many people in our community using the facility as possible to make it a good place to be. I'm intrigued by the idea of the walking around the exterior, because there is contiguous sidewalk all the way around. What would we need to do? Would that be a pretty easy fix to lighting and maybe a little signage or maybe distances marked on the sidewalk that would encourage people to use it in a different way for a walking track when people are out in the evenings? Maybe there's something we can do that isn't a big fix on that one or real costly. So I'm excited. I don't think anything's quite ruled out yet. Obviously, I have some concerns about when we're looking at locating certain activities next to streets. That's a big one for me, so we have to make sure that we address the safety issues primarily, and by that I mean playgrounds. It makes me nervous to have streets on either side of a playground. When I weigh this issue, I will be looking at what's in the vicinity, when we get farther down the road, what we don't have in the community, what needs we can meet, and what's in the vicinity that we don't want to replicate. So those are, I really appreciate all the comments tonight. It is wonderful to sit at a community meeting where we're all planning something again as opposed to complaining. So thank you all for coming out for this positive part.
Thank you, Ms. Longstreet. Mr. Burns. Yes.
Actually, I'd like to ask a question. If we could ask the police officer to explain what the changes were and what is actually going on, just.
I'm sorry, Mr. Burns. Chair and Commissioner Burns, one of the things that we did at the police department back in November was to work with parks that would maximize the impact on the ball field area. While they were in development of the fencing installation, we shifted personnel over to our tactical patrol force, and we just increased our presence down there. We had our patrol officers conduct their briefings down there, as opposed to in the station where they would normally leave. We had them leave and go down there, and then they would conduct briefings, so they would have as many officers in that area as possible. We also divided the city, the heavily impacted areas of the city for homeless, transient, illegal behavior. And we created basically 5 areas of the city, including downtown, West Beach, the beachfront area, Lower Milpas, and Upper Milpas. And then we assigned officers to those particular areas. We conducted that throughout from November through January, and we saw a positive improvement in the illegal behavior that was going on. But the reality is, in terms of law enforcement, we can only enforce the laws. We can only enforce what is illegal, and so a lot of the problems were not illegal, but were generated from, either behavior that was not observed, or behavior that was observed by individuals when they called the police, but they were anonymous calls. And so having an officer down there constantly would have been impossible given the number of areas that we have in the city. So the fencing operation was probably the single greatest impact on just removing the problem from the area. In January, after the completion of the project, we saw a significant reduction. I think in that area we had, in the first 2 weeks, we moved those personnel back to their patrol teams, but continued to work with the available officers that we had. And we went from 77 misdemeanor citations in November, 64 in December, and in the first 2 weeks of January went down to 17. So you can see that, even doubling that number, we wind up with cutting it in half. And that area includes the area of Dwight Murphy, the Cabrillo Ball Field, Lower Milpas area, down to the prolongation of Quarantina Street down to Cabrillo. So you can see that had a significant improvement. Anything that the Commission and Parks wants to do with that park that would increase usage and is always going to have a positive impact, and the police department would entertain and assist in any operation that went down there to change the amount of use that's down there. Whether that's any of the suggestions that were made, I think it's going to have a positive impact on it. As far as the movement, there is a movement of those people. Of the problems that were down at Cabrillo Ball Field. Short of it snowing for an entire winter, we're not going to change a homeless transient problem in the city without getting or encouraging housing. Whether that draws them or whether that moves them out, the number of people that we have is not going to go away fairly quickly. Without a significant change in the entire makeup of the homeless population in the city. So we continue to move our enforcement into Chase Palm Park, onto East Beach, along the boulevard, and to the downtown area. And it's a problem that it's movable, and we continue to move along with it.
I've got other questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. It's open for discussion. Any questions, comments?
I just wanted to say that I'm really excited about this project as well, because my kids, they love going down there, and it has been really hard with the activity that goes on. I was really excited about a gym until yesterday when I went home. My kids said, no way, basketball courts sound more fun. So basketball courts. I really like the idea someone had brought up about a water play feature for kids. That's something that's different. And opening up the other end, the other corner down that way at Milpas and Cabrillo, maybe opening that up so it's more inviting. And the walking path around, that sounds so great. I love that. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jacobson. Mr. Ferrara?
Thank you, Chair Wiscombe. Well, definitely this is going to be based on what we'll be able to, the funding we're going to be able to raise, and it'll probably be put together based on that funding. We should probably come up with a couple different plans based on different funding levels. But what I would really like to see, we've talked about a lot of sports so far, but not too many sports that involve women and young girls, and that's what I would really like to see. I went online yesterday to see what sports women really like, and I found out that one of them is pro fast pitch. And I'm thinking, what if we were to look at the feasibility of bringing women's national pro fast pitch to Santa Barbara and actually possibly hosting a local team of our own? This would be a great way to generate revenue. I believe it would attract many tourists during the season, because then there's a number of teams throughout the nation right now. Now, I'm sure we could find a lot of private business and a lot of sponsors for the gals, but I think we need to remember that we have a lot of girls and women who love sports too. And so I think we should look at that possibility. I think that'd really be neat, and I hope we can look at something like that during the off season when the girls aren't playing. We could use that. The guys could be playing too. If we went on a level like that, then we can really upgrade Cabrillo Ballpark. It's a jewel in the rough right now. We'd be able to put in the lighting, everything we need to do to be able to take care of the runoff. Because there are certain requirements that they ask a field to have, but the field is plenty big enough for something like that. And so I'd like to see us give it some thought. Over on this end, what about a sports center put in there? I know it would block the view somewhat, but that could be a place where you could have people as a nerve center for different sports throughout the city. A place where people who have various sporting events can meet. Maybe it could be a place where we can organize for a citywide 5K, 10K, or maybe even one day a triathlon in Santa Barbara. I see that as a possibility, but there's a lot of things we can do with this park, and I like a lot of the ideas I heard so far. And but I'd like to see a feasibility study done and see if we can generate revenue off a national women's team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ferraro. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, thank you. A couple of disjointed comments. Hopefully they'll begin to make sense. I appreciate the policeman giving us some advice of what's going on, and I do realize that with a homeless population, a lot of the people that are homeless don't seem to cause any problems at all, and it's more a very small percentage of them that actually cause the issues, and that's too bad. A couple of just comments is no one seemed to mention that the lighting, but if the light fixtures are 35 to 40 years old, that's an expense we're going to have to come up with, and I don't think anyone's mentioned any issue with light trespass, which is good because you really don't want to have light fixtures that cause problems with the neighbors. I appreciate the comment talking about sister cities. Whether it's where the chromatic arch is or if on the other side, which is Carrillo and Milpas, at that end where we really haven't talked about anything, maybe we could put something on that side, some sort of art feature, or maybe back where the chromatic arch is. And I do agree with others that call it a basketball court that would possibly also have a wall that would be handball or somehow multi-use. And if I were to call it the skateboard park light, where we'd have a small section where kids that aren't really that good could play. You could work on a skateboard, although the issue is also we might have to do some sort of low fencing around it. Once you get little kids, it's easy for them to just run away, and I don't have a solution for that. I appreciate the youth football league. I don't know if in the middle of the ballpark, if we have the ability to put in a soccer field and baseball field, or excuse me, soccer and football field in the middle of that park, make it more of a multi-use. I'm not sure the dimensions of that would fit, but it would make sense if we could do that. But I believe right now that field is used 5 nights a week with pony or other softball already, so it is already used a lot. The comment was very good with talking about lighting along Milpas. I think that really does make sense. I hadn't thought of it, and whether it's just along Milpas or if we try to make it a track around the field, that may make sense. I really appreciate the comments that people made. I hope we'll be able to do something here that'll actually work. And it is kind of exciting to be here instead of trying to say no to people, to maybe say yes to something. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Mr. Yee?
Yeah, I'm very enthusiastic about the new ideas that are coming out from the public, and especially the basketball courts. I agree. As Mr. Pickering mentioned, if they incur no cost to us, to the city, that sounds great. But I think this area should be utilized for or aimed at youth activities, such as like youth football and other handball courts and stuff. And I'm very excited that the transient population has sort of migrated from this area, so that this place is much safer and more fun to be in, I guess. So.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, I have a couple comments if no one else, everyone is through. I agree that the strategy here is to have plans in place and be ready to go when funding is available, and or you miss out. And so I think this is a really exciting process, and even though funding isn't available right now, I think this is the time to be working on this. And I thought the ideas that came out of this tonight were really fantastic. A lot of things that I certainly hadn't thought about, and really things that should be explored, definitely. I agreed with Ms. Longstreet's comments about looking into programming the fields. There are ways to do that. Sometimes fields are overlaid. Sometimes during the year they're striped differently to accommodate soccer in the outfield of the baseball field. And then, when baseball's available or when baseball's played, they're, turned into baseball, or they're used for both. That's lines on grass and some extra goals. And I think that's something that we should definitely look into to make sure that we're maximizing the use of the fields. The youth football was very intriguing. I don't know how much room that takes up, but I think that's something, that possibly should be looked at in terms of programming the fields. Ms. Longstreet also made a comment about public safety, and I think that's really key when this comes back to the Commission. Proximity of a play area to the street, that's a pretty busy area, and that will have to be thought out very carefully if we would proceed with the play area. I thought in terms of the play areas, I thought the water feature play area, which could be done in probably a pretty small space. I've seen them done where kids go up and just press a button and they get water coming over them. That was a really intriguing idea. Mr. Burns mentioned and I'm jumping around here too, I'll call them a skate obstacle. You can do just a mini skateboard obstacle, or a couple little obstacles, maybe a half pipe and a ramp or whatever, for the young kids to practice before they go to the big skate park. And I thought that was a really interesting idea, because some of them are intimidated by going to the big skate park, and really would probably like a place to practice some of their skills on a skateboard first. Handball, never thought about that. That's a really interesting idea, and I think should be explored. I thought the walking path is something that really could be probably more easily incorporated, walking, jogging around the perimeter maybe as part of some other improvements. And that was a great idea. And the historic elements, that was mentioned a couple times in different ways. That was really intriguing, drawing people into the area, tourists into the area, to view some of our history, and maybe even some history on the Chromatic Gate would be interesting. I think all of these are definitely worthy of consideration. I think that the drainage in the field and the lighting, but first of all the drainage, because that may involve regrading before we talk about fences or anything else. I think that's probably one of the key issues, is ensuring that that's up to date, because we certainly don't want to be installing an outfield fence and then have to dig up because some pipe or some drain doesn't work, and it's clear that the system is old and needs some work. I think I've jumped around enough, and I think that really covers my comments. But I think it rang loud and clear here tonight amongst the commissioners that we're all very excited about this, and the enthusiasm from all of you that showed up here tonight is just great, and we truly appreciate your taking the time to come here and give us your thoughts. They're all creative and well thought out, and we thank you for that too. Yes, Mr. Burns.
Just one last comment. Could we ask Public Works, when we were talking that we've right now got two 48-inch drains coming to the front of the park, and then suddenly it goes out to 24-inch drains, to see what happened with that also? I think Mr. Dixon brought that up. If we want to just add that as to something to look at.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Burns, if I could just address that briefly and perhaps indicate that clearly we know and the Commission understands that until we identify solutions to drainage, any investment in the ball field. Now, there are some investments that could be made. The lighting is something that will probably move forward on its own track. We'll be looking at that. And as part of that, we look at the surrounding storm drain infrastructure, where water flows, how it drains, what options we have to either tie in or improve our connection to existing drain systems. And we've already been working with Public Works staff on this issue. So we're trying to get ahead of the curve.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Zachary. Okay, that concludes the item number 6 on our agenda, Cabrillo ball field improvements. And now we have to jump back to our last item, which is item number 5, the advisory committee liaison appointments for action. Ms. Raff, do you have comments?
Chair Wiscombe and commissioners, we've brought this back to you on your agenda. As we mentioned last month, you have made your different liaison appointments in the past, but now that the 3 community center advisory committees have been disbanded and the neighborhood advisory council has now been created, it was the recommendation of the commission, and the council concurred that the formation of the NAC would include up to 2 liaisons from the Park and Recreation Commission. So we have provided to you the current list of which commissioners are liaisons to which advisory committees. That was in your packet. And you need to determine tonight who will be the liaisons to the Neighborhood Advisory Council.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Rapp. Okay. let me see how we should do this. Who would like to serve on the Neighborhood Advisory Council? Mr. Ferrara and Ms. Longstreet. Okay.
So moved.
Well, okay. We don't have a time on that yet, so you're willing to, if it conflicts with your schedule, Mr. Ferrara, you'd be willing to trade it to someone else?
Oh, of course, yes,
Okay.
I understand. that.
Okay, so that's it. Everyone else, and everyone else is fine, since we're bringing this up tonight, is everyone else fine with what they have now? There's, you taking that on and you taking that on doesn't conflict or overwhelm you at all? Yeah, okay.
We'll let you know after it starts.
Okay, that's great. So Neighborhood Advisory Council, Ms. Longstreet and Mr. Ferrara. Boy, that was easy.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I have a line item here, administrative and staff reports. I don't think that's, okay. So I just have one announcement that the next regular meeting will be Wednesday, March 23rd at 4 p.m. And do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I will make an motion to adjourn.
Ms. Longstreet made one. How about
I will
you
second it.
Okay. All in